XboxEra is about to enter its 5th year, and that's all thanks to you. If you're new here, let me fill you in. XboxEra is a platform for the Xbox community with best-in-class forums, a kick-ass Discord server, and of course XboxEra.com, chock full of the latest news, reviews and more, all focused on your favourite platform, Xbox. It's every Xbox fan's gateway to the best of Xbox Era. Our incredible podcast listened to in over 50 countries across the planet, our own digital store for games and codes, our merch store for the coolest of Xbox threads, and of course Dayone, where you can track, rate and discuss your favourite games on Xbox Game Pass. Xbox Era is built for you, and it's completely funded by you. If you value having a publication truly focused on your preferred place to play, you can support us directly via Patreon. Just head to patreon.com/XboxEra. You get cool swag and awesome perks, and we get to keep doing what we do. Become a part of the best Xbox community on the internet and help us build the next 5 years of Xbox Era. Thank you for your support. Hello friends, and welcome to another episode of Xbox Era Headlines. I'm Sika Mechanico, the date is September 12th, and today Jesse and I will be talking you through all of the latest in gaming news from across this horrific industry of failure. As a bonus for our wonderful patrons, we make audio versions of these episodes available for them to enjoy in the Patreon app, but if they're on Spotify, they can link their accounts and listen to it right there. If you want to become a Patreon legend, head to patreon.com/XboxEra. Hi, Jesse.
Hello.
It's Thursday, and that can only mean one thing.
Good news?
More industry game losses.
Oh,
Yay!
okay. Yeah.
Game devs are out the... yeah, it's terrible news. Indeed. Let's get stuck into it, shall we? 650 jobs have been cut at Microsoft/Xbox today. One would assume, as I understand it, primarily from the kind of admin, clerical support side of things, no actual game dev studios.
So there was a big statement from Phil. If you want to read it,
I do want to read it, mate.
Yeah, it definitely seems more ABK focused and not on the dev side.
Yeah, man. Let's have a read, shall we? Let me have a little load up of Phil's thing. But while I'm doing that, hi chat, lovely to see everybody again. Let's not get too down in the dumps about this, but it is pretty freaking miserable news to wake up to, especially for those if you're one of the 650. My heart goes out to you. The full email, which seems to have been obtained by everybody under the sun from Windows Central, The Verge, and Insider Gaming. Was emailed out from CEO of Microsoft Gaming, Phil Spencer, as an internal email with the subject line, changes to Microsoft Gaming. And these are Phil's words, which I will read out for you. For the past year, our goal has been to minimize disruption whilst welcoming new teams and enabling them to do their best work. As part of our aligning our post-acquisition team structure and managing our business, we've made the decision to eliminate approximately 650 roles across Microsoft Gaming, mostly corporate and supporting functions, to organize our business for long-term success. I know that this is difficult news to hear. We are deeply grateful for the contributions of our colleagues who are learning that they are impacted. In the US, we're supporting them with exit packages that include severance, extended healthcare, and outplacement services to help with their transition. Outside the US, packages will differ according to location. With these changes, our corporate and supporting teams and resources are aligned for sustainable future growth and can better support our studio teams and business units with programs and resources that can scale to meet their needs. Separately, as part of running the business, there are some impacts to other teams as they adapt to shifting priorities and manage the life cycle and performance of games. This is the important bit for the gamers out there, I suppose. No games, devices, or experiences are being cancelled, and no studios are being closed as a part of these adjustments today. Throughout our team's history, we've had great moments and we've had challenging ones. Today is one of the challenging days. I know that going through more changes like this is hard, but even in the most trying times, this team has been able to come together and show another care and kindness as we work towards continuing to deliver for our players. We appreciate your support as we navigate these changes, and we thank you for your compassion and respect to one another. Phil Spencer. I mean, there's a big part of me that isn't surprised it's more.
I know.
Right?
Well, we've talked before on neither of us are, nor will we ever be okay with it. We don't give a shit about corporate bottom lines. We like games and the people that make them. The reasoning, which I think Nick always, and people in the other friggin' Discord always yell at me, oh, you're defending it, when I'm just trying to explain the why. And I'm not saying you have to give a shit about the why. You don't. I don't actually care about the why. But the why is, I think ABK's headcount supposedly went from like 7,000 to 8,000 to over 17,000 in like the 3-year COVID bubble, with like most of that being during their acquisition. So while they were buying them, hey, we're going to buy a company that's a little under 10 grand headcount wise. And when we got them, they were supposedly
ballooned.
Yeah, up around 17,000. So, like, that's the why. Their headcount expanded massively, especially during the COVID bubble. And I'm happy that it hasn't been more, but I'm still upset that it has been so much, because we know these corporations could afford to pay these people for decades without growing.
1,000 years.
Just what they're making now, what they have in the bank, they could afford it forever. That's just not how it works, even though it would be kind of awesome if it did. But it just sucks.
No one's ever happy with just enough to live on, is that? You know, everyone always wants more, even companies, even people.
And as Gary says, we don't get these things without corporations. So you can't, I don't hate the entire system. I just hate the never, I wish it was focused on growing sustainably instead of the seeming focus on the short term more than the long term. And if you make mistakes, instead of trying to fix them and being okay with not growing for a little bit, you just cut jobs as much as you can to make sure you keep growing, even if, or don't lose. Like, I get I understand the why. I just don't think that this version of capitalism is super sustainable the way it's going right now.
Yeah. There's big parts of me as well. Like, I look at, we've spoken about this so much, and there's two things here. One, I can already see, like, I already made a joke. All right, it's Twitter. Okay, I'm allowed to joke that, you know, Microsoft were enjoying not being the bad guy for 48 hours. Now we're straight back to Microsoft's the bad guy again.
Microsoft's always the bad guy. Remember that.
That's the truth, really, is that Microsoft is always the bad guy. But the thing that bugs me about all of this, and maybe this is the pain to get forward to the future that I want, there's been all of this talk about sustainability and the games industry and the bad spot it's in, and this ever marching climb towards more, bigger, broader, more realistic, more expensive. You know, we've seen the first $700 console get announced.
Rumors around the Switch are it's probably going to be $100 more. The Switch 2 will be $100 more than the Switch was at launch. Like, everything's just,
it absolutely will.
We're finally seeing
alone,
outside of game prices, which have not, they would be like 100. They'd be more than that, especially if they were like the friggin' compared to cartridges in the SNES era. I do think we're finally seeing the inflation and the component cost increase catching up to hardware. Who knows what that ends up meaning for software? There's enough hooks, I think, in other ways to keep making more money in software where the base game price doesn't have to balloon. But you never know. Like, we know from Sony's plans, they wanted to do more. They also wanted to just make Spider-Man 3, split it down the middle, sell them both for $70. So essentially, you make one game, but you naturally make it into two things.
It's a scary world. Like, this is, I want to get back to it. Like I've said it before, I'll say it again. Give me shorter, tighter experiences. Give me more experimental stuff that doesn't kill a studio if it doesn't sell gangbusters. Stop this relentless march for ultra realism, ultra everything, 30-hour single player. Like, it doesn't need to be this anymore. Like, this, people talk about what's killing the industry. I think it's that is what's killing the industry. That and the unrelenting success of several massive free-to-play games that just won't stop. There's so much broken right now with how the industry is set up, and as much as it sucks to see these layoffs, I can't help but feel like, or at least hope, maybe perhaps naively, that the end result is a return to the good old days in some form, and that's probably extremely naive, if I'm honest. But there you go.
Yeah, I don't think you can ever, like, there are more games than ever. The good old days for AAA aren't going to be a thing. I do think, like, we did hear about it with Microsoft wanting to do that smaller game focus and have smaller teams going back and working on older IP. Like, they had talked about that because the actual AAA side of things can't change. Like, they can't ramp down Call of Duty. Call of Duty makes too much money. It is too important. Fortnite needs 3,000 plus people working on it all the time to put out all that content, and it just sets this unrealistic expectation for pretty much everything else Western live service wise. And I don't know what really can change for the top end of the industry outside of more companies realizing proper scope control. Like, we got to figure out a way to correctly scope our stuff, because especially on Sony's end of it, like, those games can take unbelievably long, and if they miss, like a Concord, it is devastating to your bottom line. And that's why I'm really worried we're going to hear about Sony firing a bunch of people soon, because they have done it, but they don't have nearly as many employees, so the numbers normally aren't as big. But, like, the only one who generally avoids it is Nintendo, but that's because it is culturally not a thing legally in their country to be able to do it that way. If you're going to get rid of someone, you got to go through a whole rigmarole of just making their job a living hell and getting them to quit, because straight up firing someone's very tough. But here in America, you make a mistake, or the previous regime makes a decision to do stuff and really increase headcount, and what is your ripcord you can always pull whenever you want, and that is just doing a bunch of layoffs. And layoffs are when you fire someone, but you treat them nicely.
I can see the chat, hey, the good old days had layoffs all the time too. Yeah, I don't think anything has been egregious.
And the good old days had
couple of years.
Probably as bad, if not way more egregious crunch.
Yes, yeah. Like, don't get me wrong. I think there are good things about now where crunch is hopefully lessened. I think just the nature of it being a creative industry, though, means there'll always be crunch, because there's always an end date that you have to get a target.
Yeah, it's just, is it your culture, or is it your sprint at the end? And is it a long sprint? Is it a short sprint? Like, again, it's part of proper managing, proper scoping. Like, it's always going to be hard to get something done, as we see all the time with, like, I just added a story for Jedi Survivor, a game that was really big and really popular, and you'd think they would have had more time, but even that one, at the end, I went from getting 25 frames per second in performance mode when I first started reviewing it and being like, wow, this might be a 5, to getting in the 40s when they did a late patch because they were pushing real hard. And even now, over a year later, they've just put out a, hey, it's finally going to run well on PC patch, which we'll talk about later.
Wow.
Because it was, like, just inherently in their engine. It didn't use most of your CPU on the PC side. Like, because game dev is super hard.
That's the crazy thing. And so many folks out there just demand the end product, demand X, Y, or Z, have no idea how the sausage is made. But I mean, I look at these job losses as well. And, there's a big part of me that thinks one of the biggest problems that specifically Microsoft has above all others is an overabundance of unnecessary middle management that makes making games a maze of red tape decision making that shouldn't be there. And there is a part of me that's like, is this going to streamline this a bit? Is that what you're talking about in between the lines? We just don't know. The likelihood is that this is, as you said at the beginning, overhead from Activision ramping up. They've combined several teams, marketing, HR, finance, all of that stuff. Do they really need 3 of these finance guys or 3 of these PR guys? I don't know the answer. The answer is probably no, right? And so is that the kind of streamlining that they're doing?
And that is the part where people come in
communication
and they say consolidation is bad because it leads to job loss. It's like, yeah, that is always going to happen, and it can be bad. But there are also times with consolidation where it's like it is the natural cycle of this economy. Like you start a company, and most of the time, unless you're us, you start a company and you are looking to grow enough to be bought. Like that is your end game, and then people will peel off and they'll start new companies, and it's just this big cycle and flow. And there are times where being bought is amazing, times where it's horrible, and you get what you get with what this system is. So what would the alternative have been for Activision if they hadn't been bought? Would it have been worse? Would it have been better? Don't know. The path they were on, it probably feels like it would have been worse. But again, don't know. I was talking with Nick yesterday. We're just hanging out because StreamYard added a bunch of shit, including dark mode, which is amazing.
Yeah, I love it.
And it was like Nick and I both wish our superpower was to be able to see alternate timelines where we could get those answers. Like if I could just look into an alternate timeline and see what would have happened if they hadn't bought ABK. Like what would have been different? Would have been better or worse for either company? Like that has always been really interesting, and I think that drives so much online discourse about this, because you have the people who legitimately care, especially those in the industry who legitimately care when others are laid off, but then so much of the talk becomes creators and influencers wanting to make sure you know how upset they are. You've got the people who want to say thing I don't like, even worse, or thing I do like. Oh, I'll try and rationalize this shitty behavior. And that just ends up leading to awful, shitty discourse, which is par for the course.
I mean, I've already seen some discourse today going, this is all the FTC need to come back and force Microsoft to divest Activision Blizzard King. And I'm like,
they already did it once.
I don't think Microsoft would do it.
Yeah.
If it was going to mean that the FTC would have an instant path forward.
And if the FTC, like they even said, they intimated, I might getting older, so hopefully the memory's okay, but I'm pretty sure they intimated that these were the first round of firings were already things being discussed internally at Activision, because again, they had hired so many freaking people around COVID, because like every corporation, they rode that bubble, not worrying about when it was going to, deflate. So, but you know what those people can do now that they've been fired.
Well, the important thing in today's economy is to learn to reskill, either that or head to the beach, or maybe learn to drive an Uber. At least that's according to former PlayStation EU boss, who says that devs that have been made redundant should get over it and go to the beach for a year. This is from Chris Deering, who did an interview or a podcast of journalist Simon Parkin's My Perfect Console podcast. If you didn't know, Chris Deering was president of Sony Computer Entertainment Europe from 1995 to 2005, and then was the president of Codemasters from 2006 to 2010. And he was asked about the current trend of layoffs across the industry. And this comes from Chris Skillian over at Video Games Chronicle. Deering replied that the layoffs were just part of business and that it wasn't fair to say that they were driven by greed. The exact quote here, this is a good one. I don't think it's fair to say that the resulting layoffs have been greed, Deering said. I always tried to minimize the speed with which we've added staff because I knew there would be a cycle and I didn't want to end up having the same problems that Sony did in electronics. Now, of course, there was recently a big layoff of Sony Studios and in London, but that whole studio setup had been run out of Amsterdam now for a few years. And I don't know. If the money isn't coming in from the consumers on the last game, it's going to be hard to justify spending the money on the next game. The games exec, who is currently an advisor to various company boards, then suggested that developers being made redundant would eventually be able to get back into the business, but they would have to sit on the sidelines for a while. Where is it? It's still where the action is, and it's like the pandemic, but now you're going to have to take a few, figure out how to get through it, drive an Uber or whatever, go off to find a cheap place to live and go to the beach for a year. yeah, like we can all just do that.
It's like the friggin' Arrested Development, I think it was, where it's a banana, Michael. What can it cost? $10. It's like when you're at that level where you just don't understand the actual day-to-day of most people, which is you're lucky if you've got a month's rent in the bank. Like that is, most people can't go more than 1 to 2 months without a job because most people can't survive without multiple incomes. Like there's just the costs on rent, and buying a house is almost impossible because that entire market, especially in America, is just giant corporations buying it for long-term investments, and you can't just go and buy a house. You got to rent it from them. And like most of the people, we got very lucky. Guy who rents it to us, we're about like half of what most of our neighbors are. Otherwise, we'd have no chance of living here. And
my partner has a similar situation with the rental on her place. But it also really frustrates me because she puts up with things in her rented accommodation that me as a homeowner, I'd be like, what the fuck is this? Like, this needs to be fixed. But if I make too much noise, they'll up the rent and then I'm really screwed. So it's like, this, and that whole side of things really, it makes my shit itch. It really does. But yeah, like Chris Deering here, I feel a little bit when you read the whole flow of the conversation, it's probably being taken a smidge out of context. Like it's a terrible thing to say.
There's no way to say it correctly in context, but the other points are pretty normal. It's like, I try not to overhire because there is a flow and I know there's going to be firings. Yep, all good, all makes sense. But the moment you try to empathize with the working man and give them some advice, you're just come off like a complete jackass.
Well, I think that's what he's saying. Is he ended that whole segment about, you know, if you get off the train of game dev, it's so much harder to get back on.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, he's kind of like, you have to kind of keep up with things and keep an eye out. But where you're constantly seeing the industry currently contracting, and this is me attempting to translate, I think, not justify or defend, but just translate. What I think he's trying to say is basically like, you might end up going, oh, okay, I've been laid off here, I'll go here. And then they'll do the same thing and there will just be this cycle. So he's kind of saying, just step back for a while without really talking about, well, you can't do that, man, because people have to live and feed their kids and keep a roof over their head and so on. So it comes off as this kind of like elitist, just go to the beach or learn an Uber. You know, like it's not that easy. It's not that easy.
And Uber pays horribly. Like you have to, especially when you got to have your own car, you got to pay for it and maintain it yourself. Like in America, in other countries, they are forced to be more like a taxi service or else they can't exist. But yeah, it's,
you know, and talking about Microsoft's broader strategy of placing games on PlayStation, when we look at layoffs across the industry, you know, and that quote from Deering there, you know, if you don't sell the last game and you have no money coming in, it's harder to justify the spend on the next game. I would just say that this is kind of Microsoft's thinking a little bit here, generally, is that like, okay, if we sell more games, we can make more games. And their publishing outfit is so huge now that it needs to employ as many avenues as possible in order to keep everybody employed, you know? And I kind of understand when you look at the industry from that kind of bird's eye view and not just, oh, my Xbox, oh, I need my games from first party and that's all that counts. When you actually take a step back and think about that broader implication of all of this has to keep funding the next thing and pay everybody and so on, it kind of makes sense. But then at the same time, you're sitting here thinking, if they weren't putting out games on PlayStation, would it make the Xbox platform more attractive? And then would it mean that more people would buy it? But it's all what ifs. I think that they've fundamentally decided, no, it probably wouldn't. People would just carry on with their third-party games and wait for the next big PlayStation
I think
one.
Like they've intimated to Jez. Jez has pretty much said that they feel like the console numbers are pretty locked in now. The only way that would shift is if one of them didn't have backwards compatibility. Because as it is now, it's much more PC-like. Your stuff should come forward with you. It will hamstring PlayStation moving forward, like we already see it with the PS5 Pro. Has to have the same CPU, essentially. Why? Because of the way they work. Like, it's a lot harder for them to maintain back compat than it is for Microsoft. It's not easy for Microsoft, especially if they're ever going to go ARM or anything. It'll be very hard. but they still have protections in place to make it more possible. But in the long run, I don't see, especially as the companies keep getting bigger and bigger, I don't think the one platform works for any of them except for Nintendo, because Nintendo can keep their scope and costs and everything down. They're the only ones.
Because of the not lack of technological innovation, but the lack of
they're
power.
not pushing. They're still not going to be pushing
they're not
4K.
pushing exactly right. So it's much easier for them to develop and release games, I think. Breaking news from Tom Warren over at The Verge. New headline here: Microsoft's Xbox turmoil isn't slowing down. He's just referencing the 650 additional job losses, which brings their total up, by the way, to 2,550 of all the ones recently announced. Microsoft have actually ordered, and this is part of his notepad thing, so I can't read the whole thing, but the nutshell is, according to a tweet, Microsoft have instructed Xbox social media accounts to go dark today amid the layoffs. This is to avoid a repeat of the Feel the Burn Xbox controller announcement during the last round of layoffs. You can read more on Tom Warren's notepad newsletter if you want to know more detail on that.
He's a good bloke.
Yeah,
but yes,
he is a good bloke.
I would call that a good move, because that was definitely not great last time. No,
it's definitely a smart approach, I think. I can see Grand Benefactor Torn Raptor in the chat saying, having that discussion. This is Xbox diversifying where games go, and then we think broadly ahead to their next strategies. And I think some of the news stories here touch on some of that, but I think that it's going to become all of these whys, all of these questions that are kind of just cyclically tumbling around like a tumble dryer gone wrong, over and over and over on podcasts and in news cycles, and with journalists scratching their heads going, but they're not selling any consoles, and freaking out. I think it's going to become more and more clear as to the why of all of these next year, and perhaps even sooner when we get some announcements. But there you go. Next up in news, Sony, after announcing the first ever $700 console, are going to be selling refurbished.
Technically not the first ever. The 3DO and some of the others were more expensive. Their first ever $700.
Yeah, sorry, I should have said their first ever. Yeah, refurbished PlayStation 5 consoles directly from themselves. The PlayStation Direct site now has a section called Certified Refurbished, offering consoles and controllers at a reduced price. This was spotted by Push Square. The listings in there, which are currently marked as coming soon, offer a refurbished PS5 with a disc drive for $389.99 GBP or $399.99 USD. That's $100 saving.
Yeah, it's similar. I'm pretty sure Microsoft has had the same thing on their website. So it's smart. Especially if you're taking things in and it's got one little broken thing, you fix it, it's fine. Then you sell it and make a whole bunch of money back, and people can get it a little cheaper, but it's from you, so there's a guarantee behind it in a way there isn't if you're buying used or anything. So good thing overall, and makes the cost of the Pro that much crazier.
Yeah. But speaking of PlayStation, the PlayStation Plus game catalog for September has been announced yesterday, bringing with it Night in the Woods, Under the Waves, Chernobyl Light, Space Engineers, and of course the big bad banner headliner, The Plucky Squire, which, if you didn't know, I'm reviewing at the moment for XboxEra. I will have my thoughts shortly on or just before release. Completed it today.
I would say outside of The Plucky Squire, which is a good little get, I think it's like a $35 game. It's not super cheap. Been a couple of really weak months. Microsoft hasn't been weak, but they have been slowing down. I think in large part because their July was so crazy that August especially was very slow for them. They've got a lot more in September, though. The only two things we know of for next Tuesday's drops are PC only, with Era History Untold and Frostpunk 2. PlayStation Plus, on the other hand, has just been pretty weak for a while. I think the PlayStation Plus service can be a little better if you want to catch up on old AAA, whereas Game Pass, especially if you look at our next story, has had a lot of day one stuff.
Yeah. Xbox Game Pass Standard has arrived, which kind of feels like the original Game Pass that was first announced back in 2017.
Yep.
But yes, this it was announced shortly after I think our episode of Headlines back on the 10th, with the new plan for Game Pass Standard going live. This is via Chris Lee over at Xbox Wire. He's the VP of Xbox Marketing. This plan brings together features that players love about Game Pass for console and Game Pass Core. This doesn't get confusing at all, while providing an additional option for when you're deciding which plan is right for you. If you're still wondering which Game Pass plan might fit your needs, we have the guide for you.
It's a pretty normal guide, except for they forgot to put that PC Game Pass is in Game Pass Ultimate.
Yes. So PC Game Pass is for PC, day one releases, blah, 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 EA Play. Playing with your friends is Game Pass Core, which gets 25 games, member discounts, and online console multiplayer. Standard Game Pass, which is hundreds of high-quality games, online console multiplayer, and member discounts. No day one games. And then Ultimate, day one releases, hundreds of high-quality games, online multiplayer, EA Play, member discounts, cloud gaming, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah. There you go.
When people have gone through the list, what isn't in Game Pass Standard, it is like 50-something day one games that have launched in the last 12 months. Yeah. Which makes sense. It's pretty much exactly what it is. We'll say a lot of people look at a service and a sub-service, and for them, it might be weak, and for others, it might be great. I mean, I think that's just always going to be the case. Like in July, for me, Game Pass was maybe their best month ever. But then in August, it was very slow. And I do think internally they're more in the we need to give people time to keep up with stuff. Because for a lot of people, just one or two of those games is enough to carry them for 2 months. Because they only play a few nights a month. Yeah. But for us who are the grazers who like playing everything and get through them pretty quickly, it can feel very slow.
Yeah, it's been a really solid year for me so far. Like I've loved gaming this year. Despite the layoffs, despite the carnage, I've had a lot of really great video games to play. So, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down because we were looking at our list of things we're looking to cover between now and Christmas. And oh God, we're actually like, who's got the time to do this one? And we don't know. So
well, there was like, there's 3 things I wanted to do that are out within 6 days of each other. So it's like, okay, I'm not doing at least one of those.
Yeah, it's gonna get nuts over here, folks. It's and if that's just on this platform, that's just on Xbox. Yeah, imagine if we, we're trying to cover the whole industry. We were trying to cover
Astrobot and Echoes of Wisdom and PC only things that hit. Like it is rather difficult.
Yeah. Oh man, it never ends. But hey ho. Speaking of Xbox, get your 360 nostalgia goggles on because friend requests are coming back to the Xbox platform. This was announced yesterday on Xbox Wire from Clark Clayton, who's a senior product manager of the player experience and platform team over at Microsoft. Users in the alpha skip ahead on Xbox consoles and users on PC Gaming Preview will now be able to preview an updated friends and followers experience with updated relationships, new privacy and notification settings. And the gist is this. In the Xbox One gen, they switched over to followers like Twitter. So you can follow someone, you can see what they're playing, but it doesn't mean you're necessarily buddies. They could follow you back and they would upgrade you internally on the system to friends, right? Because you're effectively following each other, you're friends with each other.
And even there, you could choose, do you want this friend to know who you are? Like your actual name, or you just want them to know your gamer tag, which was cool.
And now they're bringing back friend requests. So you can still follow someone, but friend requests specifically are a 2-way invite-only approved relationship. So gives you more control, more flexibility, and you can still interact with everything the same way. The way they're making it now, when they do this update in public, is that if you both follow each other, you'll become friends, and you can go in there and tweak what people can see. But going forward, once this patch lands out in the public realm, you'll be sending friend requests again, like the good old days of video gaming. Isn't that nice?
Mm-hmm. I think it's the best of both worlds, where it's going from being in the I followed you, you got to find me, follow me back. Instead, it is just that notification where it's like, hey, they want to be a friend. Or if it's somebody big and you don't want to bother them, but you would like to keep up with what they're doing for some reason, you just follow them.
Stalking them.
Yeah.
Watching you, Phil. It's fine. I think there's a part of me that thinks that this also might be doing something to stem the frightening amount of bot stuff that is going on Xbox Live. I don't know if it's been like for you, but tons of unrequested, unsolicited chat messages trying to sell me stuff, scam you, whatever the case may be. And I wonder if the global settings for the new thing mean that unless it's a two-way relationship to some degree, those messages are easier to filter out. Something like that. I don't know, because they're still allowing for the following thing. So I do wonder what improvements are being made.
I have not gotten many, but I don't think my name's out there that much.
Well, it's interesting. It was really bad 2 or 3 months ago, but as of maybe 20 plus days ago, I wiped all mine, and I haven't. Oh wow, I am actually in that update for the PC app, because I've just loaded it up and it gave me just a run through. I can actually see here I've got a pending friend request. Look at that. I don't know that person. But my messages, my chats, I've had no new crazy spam chat requests. So it's definitely something has been done about that, at least from my perspective, because I was getting like 3 or 4 a day. It was obscene. So I feel like they've tweaked something in the back end.
I remember Jez put out a ping asking people if they've been having issues, and then I didn't hear much about it because I think they were like, we need to fix this.
Yeah. Dear, oh dear. But there you go. So that's nice. As well as friend requests coming back, Steam, which has been testing its families kind of Steam application, where if you're in a shared household, you can all have access to the pool of games, has now launched it permanently, and it's the new solution now. So it's no longer in beta. It's the new solution for sharing games between groups of players. And a Steam family is 5 people. So you can purchase one game, and every member of that family has access to that game. And I'm like, okay, yes, but if Steam have managed to make that deal with all the publishers, obviously they have a huge.
If you go through and you look,
developers can choose whether or not to support the feature.
So when I was in Steam Family Share, which I am, there's like 80 or 90 of my games my son has no access to. They're not a part of it.
Wow.
Out of my 500, because of Humble Bundles. But yeah, so everyone in the so you essentially pool your licenses together for any game that is a part of Family Share. So if you own 3 copies of a game between 5 people, any 3 copies can be used at once. But that's, you can't play it 5 times. You can only play it up to 3. If you only own 1 copy, only one person can play it at a time. I believe if you are the owner, you can kick the people off and play your game. But also, it is limited in who participates. It's not everyone. It does geolocate, so if somebody's in another country, it'll just tell you to piss off. If they're nowhere near you in your country, they'll say nope. You can technically get around it if you log in on like their actual computer, give them your login if you trust them. But even then, I've heard people saying it was revoked because like you guys are obviously not in it. It is literally meant for the same house. It is meant for one home.
Bullshit the system.
Yeah, one home, or like you've got handhelds and you're on the account, and now you can give your kids their own account and they can still play stuff. Like if you got a Steam Deck. So while it has pros over game sharing, it is more regimented than PlayStation, Nintendo, or Xbox's online keys. Because when you buy a game on console, you get the license for your home console, and you get the license for yourself when you are logged in. So that's how you game share. Because there's no other way for them to do it, really, because they have to give you a license for when you're offline. Like, they knew people were going to lose their goddamn minds if you had to always be online no matter what. So your offline license is your share, the one people share, essentially. Like, okay, you set my thing as your home, or you set your console as my home console. That means you get my games. You're giving up your ability to play your shit offline. That's why they're okay with it.
Yeah, and indeed, that has happened to me rarely on the Xbox, but it has.
It is. It's when people lose their minds and stuff. It's like, well, you are game sharing in a way they probably don't want, so don't complain too loudly.
Yeah.
Because like their apathy towards your game sharing, because I think their internal metrics must show it doesn't cost them sales in the end. Because a lot of times people might not probably weren't going to buy something unless they either split it or they weren't going to buy it anyways. Like if it was going to be, there's no other solution really.
I've got two friends that literally approach it that way. They're like, if one of them really wants the game, then the other one gets it. But if they both are not sure, they'll be like, okay, let's go halves. And they'll kind of come up with this compromise. So they end up with a lot more to play because of it. And they've always got through that method a permanent co-op partner for co-op games, which is really great. What else? Bethesda have launched the Elder Scrolls Castles, which is now available to download.
Yeah, it just popped up on my phone.
Yeah, on Android and Apple phones, presumably. What is this? It's a create your own castle game and make decisions and stuff in the Elder Scrolls universe with a kind of cartoony.
Yeah, you got to go for it's the mobile. I would call it the mobile aesthetic.
Oh, okay, that's a good way.
Mobile games never go for any type of realism because people just aren't used to that and they don't want it.
Yeah, it's available now. And there's RPG battling in it. There's, I guess, cards and stuff and families. It looks a lot like Fallout Shelter, but castles. To me.
Yeah, I think it was going more for. I can't remember the name of the game. This freaking trailer's not actually showing the game at all. But yeah, it is. I think it was more Christ. There's one of those games, Reigns, I think was the name of it. It's more decision-y making, like Fallout Shelter. Yeah, here's the actual game. It doesn't look anywhere near as good as cartoons, but it doesn't look bad. But yeah, it's a mix of genres. You're running a castle. There's some Simsy stuff. There's some fighty stuff. Then it's got that overall Fallout Shelter look, but they added in more mechanics on top of that. So it's a little deeper.
Have you tried it yet?
I tried. No, I've been busy, and now Shadows of Doubt just came in, so I'm still busy.
Oh, it's fun.
I'm very excited for Shadows of Doubt.
Which I don't think I've even heard of Shadows of Doubt.
It is what's this one? You know what? I'll get a cool looking trailer because boy, is that game got a vibe. Shadows of Doubt is a voxel. So you know immediately what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
Shadows of Doubt. It's been in early access for a while. It is coming out on consoles and PC. It's hitting version 1.0 on the 26th. I now have it on PC for review. I'm going to get it on Xbox soon. It is a living, breathing, procedurally generated world in this city, where you are going through and doing...
this is the detective-y one.
And you are solving crimes.
I am intrigued by this. Yes. Yeah. Okay, I do know about this game.
So I just got this one in. Super excited for it. Like, it's a very pretty, interesting, and it's this big world, and you got to solve crimes, and yeah, it looks really intriguing. It's been in early access for a while. People have really liked it in that. Very curious what 1.0 is going to be and change, and you can keep an eye on XboxEra to find that out over time when I do a review.
At some point soon. I've been continuing my early access journey with Towerborn. I really like that game. I've decided I really wanted to.
I streamed it.
Be successful.
You know how?
Did you?
In the chat, I believe it was OXCJ or 0XCJ just gifted it to me on Steam.
What? And I can see him in the chat right now saying, "Hey peeps, how is everyone doing?" Well, dude, let's squad up at some point when you've got the time, because
I will never have the time.
Well, if something's important to you, you'll make the time. Oh, I'm sorry, we're busy doing evergreen SEO now because that is the internet.
Go to patreon.com/XboxEra if you want us to play more things on stream and for you, and not have to focus on evergreen SEO, because that's the only way you can make any money online.
That's true. Sorry, what website should they go to if they want to become cool kids and be in the cool kids club and be a part of the amazing elite part of this community?
Patreon.com/XboxEra.
I thought that was so natural the way we did that. It just bounced, it just riffed.
It was not.
Yeah, well, I know. Anyway, next up in the news, Star Wars Jedi Survivor has received yet another PC performance patch, and it's removed de novo's DRM, which is pretty damn great.
I figured I'd throw this one in because this game is a part of Xbox Game Pass.
It is. It's
on
part
PC.
of EA Play. But yes, there you go. Substantial performance improvements for various PC hardware configurations and the removal of de novo DRM. And if you're on PlayStation, there's an upcoming PS5 update that will enable save file transfers from the upcoming PS4 version of the game.
Because they still have to do that weird shit where you... so I don't know why you would ever go from PS5 to PS4.
No, I think they're saying, hey, if you're buying it on PS4 and you end up upgrading to PS5, you can transfer your sale.
Okay.
You've got the upcoming PS4 version, right?
Yeah.
Which is coming out on September 17th.
Which all just works on the Xbox side, but it does not because of the
delivery.
The PS4 store was a fire that they made better with PS5, but it wasn't backwards better. It was only forwards better, which is why it's always such a pain in the butt to go from PS4 to PS5. But Jedi Survivor was a great game. Really enjoyed it. Enjoyed the shit out of it. Loved every second I was playing of it, even though it ran like ass most of the time. Thankfully, it ran a lot better when they patched it. Yeah. But that was only on console. And even there, VRR saved it for me. It might finally run okay because they're like it didn't use most of your cores on PC, which is why it was just so bad for most people. So I'm very curious what changes here.
According to the devs, the changes are frame rate improvements for various hardware configurations, smoother gameplay with fixes for several sources of frame rate hitching, CPU usage for ray tracing has been optimized, and ray tracing now scales better for high-end GPUs. And various quality of fixes. I think you mean quality of life fixes there, guys, including improved mouse and keyboard control across many in-game menus, bug fixes for rare crashes and collision issues. The full patch notes are available on the official website. So if you're really, really intrigued, head there and check it out. And then last but not least, and this one might get people all very, very excited. Legendary skateboarder Tony Hawk recently appeared in a new episode of Mythical Kitchen over on YouTube, which was released today. And the skateboarder was asked about the future of the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater franchise as it celebrates its 25th anniversary this year. This is via Mike Straw over at Insider Gaming. Tony Hawk said there is definitely something planned to celebrate the anniversary. However, he wouldn't say much more beyond that. I wish I could tell you more, but I can tell you that I've been talking with Activision again, which is insanely exciting. We're working on something. He wrapped it up with saying that he believes it'll be something that the fans will truly appreciate. Now, whether that's a new game or something else, we'll have to wait and see.
They did obviously we do know Microsoft Store version. It is ready on PC, but it's still not in Game Pass yet.
Yeah, that'd be
for 1+2's remake.
Yeah, that'd be an easy thing to announce, but I think there'll be more than that, right? So
you'd hope.
We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see.
Like a 3+4 remake doesn't seem like it would be a crazy thing.
No,
and then people lose their minds because it'll be on everything.
Yeah.
It's like Tony Hawk is akin to Doom. It's literally known for being on everything, everywhere, all the time. It's fine. As long as it's in Game Pass, I'm happy.
Indeed. And then last bit of news really from us is Jackbox are releasing the Jackbox Naughty Pack today. It's out now, I believe, on all platforms.
Not that our review can go out.
Is on. But weirdly, our review is embargoed until later on. So keep an eye out because Jesse and I and Predrag played this with the developers at Gamescom. And we've had access, and we did a night of having a go on all of it. It's a bit frustrating to try and do a party game for a remote team. So we've had to kind of bear that caveat in mind.
Because as we can say from the regular embargo, 2 of the games are better in person.
Yes.
One literally requires you to raise your hand. And then the other one is you having to talk to other people actively and not just vote on things you draw. So there's one good online-only game in it from what I remember at what we saw at Gamescom.
Yeah, but we'll have the kind of verdict of that later on today. No video for this one, as entertaining as it is, but there will be lots of amusing screenshots on XboxEra.com for you to giggle at. So keep an eye out for that one. And then what else have we got coming out? Oh, we just dropped the review earlier on this afternoon for Caravan Sandwich, which Chenga's played through. He liked it okay, I think. I think he ended up with a 7.3 out of 10. But go give it a read. The review is live on XboxEra.com right now. And then we have got, hopefully going out today, a Black Ops 6 beta impressions piece and accompanying video full of clips of Fairy Empire donging and being donged, as they say. Although I was quite pleased he managed to get a clip of another player called Hawk Tour in the video, which made me laugh. But there you go. Outside of that, I think that's about all of the news for now. I think that's going to do it. That's going to do it. It's the end of the show. Many thanks to everybody who's been in the chat today and hanging out and watching it. We appreciate you guys. If you do enjoy what XboxEra does, and honestly, go check out how many reviews we put out comparatively to other websites. Go check out how many times we live stream comparatively to other websites. And then think to yourself, do I like consuming this content? And if I met these guys in the street, would I buy them a cup of coffee? And if the answer to that question is yes, I mean, you might want to kick Nick in the balls a little bit, but if you'd like to buy me and Jesse a coffee, you can head to patreon.com/XboxEra. But hey ho, until next time, we'll be back on Tuesday for more headlines, but you can look forward to the Mainline podcast at an earlier time this week, right? Is it an hour earlier or 2 hours earlier?
It was supposed to be an hour, I thought, yeah.
An hour earlier. So an hour earlier than normal this week in all time zones. So keep an eye out for that. We'll see you in the chat on Saturday night. Until then, ciao for now.